the number five is once you have playbooks, it's practice, practice, practice. It's like we always say, no, I'll do this in, you know, ask people, we'll do this in some sessions we do. Well, we'll ask, we go around and say, who's your favorite professional sports team? Right. And people will name a football or a baseball or a hockey or a soccer team. And then I say, and if that team didn't have a playbook, what would you think about their level of professionalism? And if they didn't practice their
Yeah.
playbook, what would you think about their level of professionalism? Now, you tell me what percentage of sales teams either don't have a playbook or don't practice their playbook. Raise your hand. Right.
What?
So, I mean,
Yeah.
sales is like a sport, it's just a repetitive skill that if you practice it, and look, we didn't do the research, but the folks that write the Gartner, folks that wrote the Challenger sale, as well as the Sales and Marketing Association, did major studies on the impact of skills coaching. And what they found was the tipping point was 1 hour a week. If you get to 3+
Wow.
hours of targeted skills coaching, you start to see significant performance gains. I mean, significant 17 to 19%. It's the number one sales enablement investment. And you just need 1 hour a week. But much like the marketing measurement, it's got to be consistent, right? You have to come back to it and agree on the skills to practice and the repetition. But if you'll commit to that repetition and iteration, it can have very meaningful impacts on your performance.
What do you think that percentage is of companies that run a sales playbook? I mean, the companies that have formal sales organizations that don't have a playbook, is that pretty high?
What I would say is the percentage that have a playbook now has gone up. I mean, it's just become, it's probably, 2/3 would say they have some kind of playbook. The gap is more on the practice. I mean, when the Sales and Marketing Association did this study, 77% said they weren't doing enough coaching, and the average amount of coaching per rep per month was like 45 minutes. So often it's they build playbooks and then they go on a shelf, and it's not actually put into practice, and it's never iterated and learned. So, the modern sales playbook is it's got to be wedded to practice.
No, that makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. You have to document it and then you have to actually use it. And on the marketing side, the playbook is more what? We have to be a little more creative. So it's the ICP, it's the core marketing messages, right? Those things need to be documented. The core use cases, keywords for SEO, the playbooks are very different, but they're also important. And I would say, I'd be shocked if 1 in 10 companies had a marketing playbook. I think there's probably a very big opportunity there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so fascinating conversation. It's awesome to see the points of alignment. I'm going to just say what I think is the top three for folks that are listening, and then would love to hear your top three or iteration. I mean, we agreed on you got to get the messaging consistent across all of your teams, otherwise you confuse your buyers. I think we agreed, or at least I introduced the idea that that should come from capturing your customer voice and your customer stories. And then it seemed like two and three was, start to actually test a bunch of marketing channels to see what's working and start to figure out who your ICP is. And once you're figuring out marketing channels on ICP, now you're in a position to start doubling down on the messaging that's working.
Yep. No, I think that's about right. You're saying pick a top three of the five we just talked about. Is that
Yeah,
yeah.
I say across them, it felt like
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
those were some points of alignment, right? Is get your messaging aligned, make sure
Yep.
your customer voice, and then test a bunch of marketing channels, but measure, and then measure your ICP, and now focus in the areas that work.
Yeah. And as a career growth marketer, it was funny. I was calling myself a growth marketer to get jobs, back in I'd say probably the mid 2000, like 4, 5, 6, I kind of came up with, hey, and I'm sure a lot of people came up with it at the same time, but I started calling myself a growth marketer like in the 2004, 2005. And I realized, companies were responding to it, like, holy cow, I'm a growth marketer. But when they would ask me, well, what does that entail? And, what do you believe as a growth marketer? It was exactly what you just said. As a marketer, you have to try everything, measure everything, and then throw away the stuff that doesn't work and run the wheels off the stuff that does. And it's amazing how many companies don't do that.
Yeah. Eric, great to connect again today. Really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure both our collective audiences will as well. So appreciate the time.
Yeah, this was good, Brent. Thanks for having me.